Ever wished you could just hit the mute button on a migraine?
I think we all have.
Well, turns out silencing those awful headaches might be more possible than we thought.
Yeah, some really amazing new research is giving us a whole new understanding of the link between stress and migraines.
And potentially some revolutionary new treatment options. We've got a ton of fascinating studies to dig into today.
I'm excited to dive in.
Me too. But first, for anyone who might not be familiar with migraines, can you give us a quick rundown of what they actually are?
Absolutely. A migraine is so much more than just a bad headache, you know?
No, it's not just like popping an Advil and moving on.
Exactly. It's a complex neurological disorder with a whole cascade of effects in the brain and the body.
I've heard some people describe it as debilitating.
It absolutely can be. While a regular headache might cause some mild pain, migraine can be this intense throbbing pain, usually on one side of the head.
I think a lot of people don't realize it's more than just pain too.
Right. There's also nausea, vomiting, and even extreme sensitivity to light and sound.
And those visual disturbances, the auras.
Exactly, those two. For a long time, the exact causes of migraines were a bit of a mystery, though.
We knew things like stress or hormonal changes could trigger them, even certain foods or changes in weather.
Yeah, but we didn't really know the why, the underlying biological mechanisms.
But that's where this new research comes in.
It does, and it all starts with a neuropeptide called PACAP38.
PACAP38.
Right, it's this little molecule released in your body when you're stressed, like a signal flare that says, hey, something's not right here.
So our body's ancient alarm system.
Exactly. For most people, this stress response is helpful. It preps us to face a challenge, keeps us safe.
But for people prone to migraines.
This PACAP38 surge can set off a chain reaction that leads to a full-blown migraine attack.
Okay, so let's break this down. How does PACAP38 actually trigger a migraine?
Well, researchers found it activates a specific group of nerves at the base of the skull, the trigeminal ganglion.
The trigeminal what?
Ganglion. Think of it as the grand central station for pain signals in your head.
So when this trigeminal ganglion is activated.
That's when the migraine pain kicks in.
Interesting. It seems almost like stress is hijacking this pathway.
It does, doesn't it?
Woo.
Triggering migraines even without the classic aura coming first.
So is our body trying to tell us something with these migraines? Like, hey, take a break already.
You know, that's a great question, and it leads us to the theory of migraines as an ancient warning system.
So instead of just being a nuisance, they might actually be helpful.
Maybe. In the past, stressors were more physical, right? Predators, bad weather. Migraines may have forced people to rest and avoid harm.
To prioritize survival.
Exactly. But now our stressors are more often things like deadlines or relationship troubles.
Chronic psychological stress.
Right. It's like our ancient biology is a bit out of date. We're getting migraines for things that might not need such a strong reaction.
But if we understand this pathway, does that offer hope for new treatment?
Absolutely. That's what's so exciting.
What are the current treatment options for people with migraines?
Well, there are medications to take during a migraine to relieve the pain, and some that are taken preventively.
But those don't work for everyone.
No, they don't. And they can have some rough side effects.
So where does this new research fit in?
Well, by knowing how PACA38 interacts with the trigeminal ganglion.
We can target that pathway?
Exactly. We could potentially stop the migraine before it starts, especially for people whose migraines are mostly triggered by stress.
It would be incredible to just prevent that whole cascade. But are we silencing a valuable warning system if we do that?
That's a really important question, and it's something researchers are definitely considering.
If we can block stress-induced migraines, are we taking away a signal that's prompting us to address our stress?
It's a tough question, but an important one. Are we giving people the tools to manage stress without the pain, or are we doing something potentially harmful?
It's definitely a complex issue. But this research also seems to offer a deeper understanding of how stress affects our bodies and minds in general.
Absolutely, and that knowledge could be huge, not just for people with migraines, but for everyone.
And it seems like we're just at the beginning of this research.
Oh, definitely. There's so much more to explore.
Well, we'll definitely be keeping an eye on that. But before we wrap up this part of our discussion, let's zoom out and talk about the HPA axis. Can you explain what that is and how it's connected to this whole thing?
Of course. The HPA axis stands for the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. It's our central stress response system.
It's a mouthful.
It is. It's this network of interactions between the brain and the adrenal glands that regulate our reactions to stress.
And when we encounter a stressful situation,
the HPA axis kicks in and releases a bunch of hormones, including cortisol.
this stress hormone.
Right. Cortisol helps our bodies deal with stress by increasing energy levels and suppressing things we don't need in that moment.
Like digestion.
Exactly. But here's the interesting part. Researchers have found that people who get migraines often have higher cortisol levels.
Both in general and right before a migraine.
Yeah, so it seems like the HPA axis and the stress response it triggers are involved in migraines.
And chronic stress can make the HPA axis go haywire.
Right, it can. It can become overactive, which means cortisol levels stay high, and that can make migraines worse and more frequent.
It's like the body's stress alarm gets stuck in the on position.
It really is. That's why managing stress is so important for people who get migraines.
That makes sense. We've covered a lot of ground already, from the brain pathways involved to this idea of migraines as an ancient warning system.
We have.
And this research is giving us so much to think about, both about the potential for new treatments and the role of stress in our lives.
It's a lot to unpack.
Absolutely. But we'll have to save that unpacking for the next part of our deep dive.
Welcome back. We've been exploring the connection between stress and migraines.
And this idea of migraines as an ancient warning system.
Mm.
But what happens if new treatments actually silence that alarm?
That's the big question, isn't it? Do we lose something important, something that's trying to keep us safe?
It's a tricky balance. Wanting to relieve suffering, but not wanting to cause harm in the process.
Exactly. It highlights the need for a more holistic approach to migraines.
Thinking about both the physical symptoms and the psychological stuff going on too.
Absolutely. Giving people the tools and the knowledge to manage their migraines and their overall health.
Speaking of which, we also touched on the fact that women are more likely to get migraines than men.
3 times more likely, actually.
Wow, that's a big difference. And they often happen between the ages of 20 and 50.
Yeah, a time when hormones are fluctuating a lot.
So could there be a connection there between hormones and migraines?
Researchers think so. Hormonal shifts, especially with estrogen, seem to play a big role, especially in women.
It makes the brain more sensitive to migraine triggers.
That's the idea. So it's not just stress, but this whole interplay of hormones and brain chemistry. Really complex stuff.
It really is. I'm also curious about those experiments with the mice, the ones that helped us understand the stress pathway better.
Ah, yes, the mice without the MIGPRB2 receptor.
The what now?
The MIGPRB2 receptor, it's found on mast cells.
Okay, and mast cells are.
They're like tiny alarm systems all over your body.
And they release inflammatory substances when they're triggered.
Exactly. So in these mice, they removed a key piece of that alarm system.
And they didn't get migraines after stress, even after being injected with PACF48.
Right, they didn't. Which suggests that blocking this receptor could be huge for preventing migraines.
That's incredible. But are there any risks to blocking this receptor?
That's a good question, and something researchers are still working on. Mast cells are involved in other things too, like immunity and healing.
So we have to be careful not to mess with those processes.
Exactly. It's a reminder that even promising discoveries take time and careful study.
But this research is so promising. It really seems like it could change lives.
It does, doesn't it? It's an exciting time to be studying migraines. There's so much hope for the future.
Me too. But let's circle back for a sec to the HPA axis and its connection to migraines.
Sure. So just to recap, the HPA axis is our main stress response system, right?
And it controls how we react to stress.
Exactly. When we're stressed, the HPA axis kicks in and releases cortisol.
The stress hormone, as we said earlier.
Right. And remember, people with migraines often have higher cortisol levels.
And chronic stress can make the HPA axis go haywire.
Exactly. It can get stuck in overdrive, cortisol levels stay high, and that can make migraines much worse.
So it's not just about the stressful event itself, but how our bodies react to stress over time.
That's a key point, and that's why managing stress is so vital for people with migraines.
Things like meditation, yoga, even just spending time in nature.
All those things can help. They calm the HPA axis down and bring those stress hormones back into balance.
That makes sense. It's like we need to calm the storm inside to prevent the migraine storm.
A great way to put it. Our mental and physical health are so interconnected.
They really are. Now, let's shift gears a bit and talk about why migraines might exist in the first place. We talked about the evolutionary theory, but can we explore that a little more?
Of course. The idea is that migraines are an ancient warning system, a way for our bodies to tell us something's wrong.
So they're not just a nuisance, they're actually protective.
Potentially. For our ancestors, stress was often a sign of real danger.
Like a predator lurking nearby.
Right. A migraine, with all its awful symptoms, would force them to stop and rest.
To stay safe.
Exactly. It was a powerful signal to prioritize survival. And even though the threats we face today are different, our bodies might still be reacting the same way.
So we're getting migraines for things that might not actually be life or death situations.
That's the thought. Our ancient biology hasn't quite caught up with modern life.
Fascinating. But then that brings us back to that question. If we block stress-induced migraines, are we disabling a valuable warning system?
It's a tough one. We want to relieve suffering, but we don't want to create unintended consequences.
So we need to find that sweet spot. Treat the migraines effectively, but also empower people to understand and manage their stress.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that migraines are complex and finding what works best for each individual.
And this research is giving us the tools to do just that.
I think so too. It's a really hopeful time. The future of migraine treatment is looking brighter than ever.
I agree. Well, we've covered a lot of ground again today. The science, the potential treatments, the big questions.
It's been a great discussion.
It really has. We'll have to leave it there for now.
We'll pick up where we left off in the next part of our deep dive.
So stay tuned. We'll explore what all of this means for the future of migraines and what we can do to finally get those headaches under control. Welcome back to our deep dive into migraines.
We've been unpacking a lot, haven't we?
We have. From brain pathways to hormones to stress.
And now we're looking at the big question. What happens when we try to silence this potential ancient warning system?
If migraines are our body trying to tell us something, are we making a mistake by blocking them?
It's a valid question. Pain often has a purpose, right?
Because alert us to danger.
Exactly. So if migraines are our body's way of saying pay attention, what happens if we shut that down?
Are we masking a symptom without actually fixing the problem?
It's possible we could be missing out on important information about our health.
So how do we find that balance
Yeah.
between treating migraines and respecting our body's signals?
I think it starts with a more nuanced approach to treatment.
Not just focusing on the pain itself, but the whole picture.
Right. Empowering people to understand their triggers, their stress levels, their hormones.
And to make lifestyle changes that support their overall well-being.
Exactly. Medication can be a huge help, but it's not a magic cure-all.
It's about recognizing that migraines are complex and influenced by so many different things.
And finding what works best for each individual person.
This research has given us so much insight into how migraines work.
It really has. But it's also raised a whole new set of questions.
And that's how science works, right? Always evolving, always pushing us to learn more.
The future of migraine treatment is so promising.
It really is. We're on the verge of developing therapies that could truly change people's lives.
But we need to move forward carefully.
With a deep understanding of the human body and a respect for its natural processes.
It's about finding solutions that alleviate suffering while also empowering people to take control of their health.
Well said. And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into migraines.
It's been a fascinating journey.
We hope you've learned something new today. Something that will help you understand migraines better and advocate for your own health.
Knowledge is power. And with the incredible research being done, I'm truly optimistic about a future where migraines no longer hold us back.
I am too. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into the world of health and science.